The first thing we'd like you to do is to say your name and where you are from.
My name is John Lulias, and I'm from Tarpon Springs, Florida.
Okay, and what do you do in Tarpon Springs?
Currently, I am the owner and partner of a travel agency, and I've been in that business for 35 years. But my hobby has been Greek folk dance and Greek folk culture.
And tell us a little bit about the Tarpon Springs area and what that Greek community there.
Tarpon Springs is known as a Greek community throughout the world, actually, and mainly because it was developed because of the sponge industry back in the early 1900s, 1906, and people from Greece and particularly from the Greek islands, the Dodecanese Islands, came there because they were sponge divers and they were the few who would do it. So when they discovered sponges in the Gulf of Mexico, they went to Greece, brought the sponge divers from there, and of course their families followed, and other Greeks followed, and that's how the community began.
Do they still do sponge diving?
They still do sponge diving in Tarpon Springs, and actually some are making a very good living out of it. It is also a tourist destination filled with Greek restaurants, Greek gift shops and stores, and it's a very strong Greek community still, with a high percentage of the people being Greek, speaking Greek, having all kinds of activities throughout the year that are Greek related.
So you grew up in this Greek, you're from Philadelphia, but you grew up in this Greek community. When did you start folk dancing and when did you really get interested in Greek folk dancing as a hobby?
Well, I started Greek folk dancing from a child, and that's the thing about Tarpon Springs. There was always an occasion to Greek dance because you had festivals, you had what we call a glendi, which was a Greek festival, you had weddings, baptisms, all kinds of occasions where the town was very, very close knit, so everybody went to everything. And we had great live musicians from my being a young child, I remember. So we had the opportunity to Greek dance a lot more than people did in other areas of the United States. And so this way we were able to uh, retain the culture and the folk dance, I believe, in a very true way there. And so as I grew up, I was very involved in our church, and we had a Greek dance group and things like that. But then I moved to Philadelphia, and I sort of got out of it during college. But then in Philadelphia, I became part of a group called the Terpsichoreans, which were put together for the 1976 bicentennial. And the Greeks there wanted to have something to represent Greece, so they put together a dance group that was directed by a couple that had come there from Montreal. So I got back involved in Greek folk dancing, and then after a short time there, after I lived there for like 7 years, I moved back to Tarpon Springs, and I started a dance group there, and sort of revitalized the Greek folk dance there.
Now, when you were doing folk dance from the time you were younger and with the Terpsichoreans, would you say those were authentic Greek dances? Or I guess what I'm asking is to define sort of what's authentic. And
In Tarpon Springs, as I grew up, they were authentic dances because they were the simple dances that the people of the town knew, that they used in their villages back in the islands, and they brought them over to the United States. So when there was a wedding, there was a specific order of dances that were done. The first dance that was done by the family of the bride, and the leader was the father, then the bride, etc., etc. So that was very traditional. When the Terpsichoreans came into my life, with the I didn't know that much about Greek folk dance other than what I knew in Tarpon Springs, which was very island based. And the Terpsichoreans, the director, Nikos Metalinos, had brought in folk dances that he learned from various places, including, I believe, Ethan Karas in California and other people. And a lot of them were contrived Greek folk dances. They were sort of mixed from folk dances or folk dancers from other places. Maybe they were international folk dance groups that developed a Greek folk dance. But from there, it started to become a little more serious where people started to do more research. And you start to find out, say, that isn't really an authentic dance. It was sort of choreographed. And now, we can water it down to see what the real dance was.
Okay, so when you became interested in finding out what the authentic Greek dances were, or maybe that's not the right word, but how do you study that? How did you find out what you were looking
Well,
for?
it started to happen after I moved back to Tarpon Springs. I started to research, and I started to, with the dance group that I formed, we started to learn dances, and then I said, let's go to Greece. So we went to Greece, 30 dancers, raised the money to go. And by doing that in 1983, we started to develop a relationship with people in Greece. And we started originally with the Dorostratou Theater and the dancers there, and with Dorostratou herself. And we were proud to say that the next time we went, 2 years later, we were the first foreign dance group that danced on their stage with them. So it was quite an incredible thing that we did. But what that did was it started a relationship with Dorostratou's theater, and we started to bring their instructors to Tarpon Springs during the Winter Dance Conference and started teaching. So by that, we started to learn other dances or the way dances were done by them. Not to say that all of those were exactly authentic, but when you're talking authentic, I think you're referring to how it was done in the village at that time. Dorostratou put it on the stage to make it more appealing to the public and to the eye of the audience. So there was a difference there. There was a little bit of choreography, but it wasn't, in some cases, a lot of choreography, but she just sort of was able to put the dances together from different areas to make them more pleasing on stage.
Did you go to the villages too? And
After the first couple of trips, we started to go, and I started personally to go to villages, but we also started to find other people in Greece who were interested in Greek folk dance, because at that point, there wasn't a lot going on yet with the exchange of Greece and the United States in Greek folk dance. I didn't know anything about FDF at that point, not in the early 80s. But when I was going to Greece through my travel business and through taking my group over there, we started relationships with other areas of Greece that had instructors, that were local instructors, which were only very, very knowledgeable in the dances from their village or their island. And that's when you start to learn the difference between those authentic dances and those that were put on stage by someone else.
I don't think I asked you what the name of your group was and when you started it.
I started the group called Levendia in Tarpon Springs in 1979 when I returned from Philadelphia. And Levendia is a Greek word meaning spirited youth. And so from that group, which still exists today, not under my direction, but still exists today, they still perform and share in the folk dance culture.
Could you describe for us what island dancing is like?
Island dancing, of course, there are a lot of islands in Greece, 2,000, but only a couple hundred that are inhabited. But even dances from various islands are different, just like in the mainland of Greece. But my mother's side of the family was from the Dodecanese Islands. And so islands in the southern Aegean, even a little the northern Aegean and the Cyclades had some similarities in that they were affected by the cultures of of Asia Minor, and so that you had these very, very I want to say delicate steps and lighter dances than you did in the mainland. The costumes themselves were, of course, lighter because you're on the islands, and so things were brighter and cheerier. But those are the dances that I also related to because of being from Tarpon Springs. So that we danced a lot of island dances, or in the style of island dancing, which is a much smoother style than, I would say, dances from Macedonia or Thrace. Very, very different.
Okay. Kind of fast forward, or not fast forward, but how did you get involved with FDF?
I had a friend through the winter dance conferences that we were doing, Paul Guinness, who was in New York at the time, and he was sort of doing the same thing, paralleling what we were doing in Florida. He started a group up there, and he was very interested in the Greek folk dance here in the United States. So he came to one of our conferences, and we became friends. And he came out here to FDF. He said, "John, you need to come out and see what's going on out here." The East Coast was very, very different than the West Coast. I want to say the West Coast Greek dancing at that point was a little Americanized. And the East Coast had a lot of Greeks still living in cities on the East, so that they maintained a little more of the Greekness in the dancing and things like that. So Paul said, "Come out because you need to see this." So I went out, I think 1986 was the first year. And then I was asked to be a judge the following year. So I started judging at FDF in Anaheim, and I believe that was 1987.
Okay, and what was your experience like as a judge at FDF, and how many years did you do that?
My experience as a judge was actually, it was phenomenal at the beginning because it was FDF was still sort of new. People were excited about it, and it was rapidly changing. And I believe that being a judge had some influence on, telling the kids or the directors, try to do this or work on this or learn from that. And it was at this point that FDF was also starting to grow and research, and they were bringing also people now from Greece to try to help in teaching dances and making them more authentic and making the costumes more authentic. And people like Paul Guinness, Joe Graziosi, and I, who were from the East Coast, helped, I think, in doing part of that. But FDF was also something that was quite overwhelming when you came, because you had hundreds of dancers, and you saw this thing that we didn't have that on the East Coast, this competition. But it was an amazing thing, and you saw what it could do, and the friendships it created, and the bonds it created, and all that went with having a good time.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a certain philosophy or style as a judge?
Well, I believe my philosophy was to be true to the dance. And you can be true to the dance and also choreograph it as long as you don't lose the dance in the choreography and the style. The style is what's important, because every village, every island, every mainland village has its own style. So that's where, I would judge that from my perspective. But I also felt that, by being a judge, I gave something to it for the island part, because at that point, there weren't many people who knew a lot about island dancing out here. It was mostly dances from Thrace, from Macedonia, and also, of course, from Crete, which has a very different island style of its own.
That's interesting. Did you help bring musicians to FDF?
At some point, yes, particularly from the Dodecanese Islands, helping make connections for groups from here with groups there, from Rhodes, from Kalymnos, from other islands of the Dodecanese. And we had brought some and still continue to bring musicians from Greece, and not only the Dodecanese Islands, to Tarpon to play and to be part of festivities or workshops.
We kind of skipped over the Winter Dance Conference. You like to hear about that?
The Winter Dance Conference was something, like I said, when we went to Greece, we thought it would be fun to bring these instructors over, and we would have dancers from other communities come so they could learn dances and then go back and teach them to their groups or bring their whole group and learn them, so that when they have their festivals and things like that, they could perform something new and it wasn't the same old thing over and over again, because that's what groups were doing. So my group used to initially go all over the United States and perform. We would perform at different Greek festivals and also help other groups get started so the community could have their own group. And so when we had these winter dance conferences, we would invite instructors from Greece and musicians, and they would come, and then we would have workshops, and we would have big dance parties and performances by the groups. So it was sort of like a mini FDF, but it wasn't a competition. It was more about learning and then exhibiting your dances with your group.
And was that connected with the Greek Orthodox Church at all? Or?
Well, the dance conference, of course, was done by Levendia or hosted by Levendia, which was under the St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church in Tarpon Springs. But we also had it connected to the Epiphany celebration in Tarpon Springs, which was always on January 6th, because it added more of an excitement to the weekend. And the kids who came from all over the United States for the dance conference had never seen Epiphany, so it was something that was very exciting, and they enjoyed the whole celebration of Epiphany.
Can you explain what the Epiphany celebration is?
Yes, Epiphany is probably one of the most important holidays of the Greek Orthodox Church. It is in Greek Theophania, which is the presence of God. And so he came down, and this is when the Holy Spirit was given to Christ, and so it's the baptism of Christ. And so in Tarpon Springs, it's the official city for celebrating Epiphany in the United States by the Greek Orthodox Church. So all the church hierarchs, the archbishop is there. They have a diving of the cross, which is like 60 to 75 young boys who dive for the cross, and the retriever is the lucky one, and he has luck throughout the year. And then they have a huge festival afterwards, and this is where the groups would dance. So you'd have thousands of people watching them dance. So it's very exciting, and that was part of the draw for having the Winter Dance Conference there.
Okay, I had forgotten about the diving of the cross.
Mhm.
I love that tradition. You received the Florida Folk Heritage Award. What was that like, and what was it for?
Yes, I received last year I was nominated for the Florida Folk Heritage Award, and I did receive it. It was for keeping Greek culture and preserving it in the state of Florida and throughout the United States. So it was an honor to receive it because it was for the work that I've done in building up Greek folk dance and starting it and helping to keep the dance group that I have and other dance groups going, etc. And it was an award that was given by the governor of Florida. So it was a very nice and prestigious thing for me.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
By the way. As far as going back to FDF, I've always wondered if you feel like the dancers themselves have a good understanding of the stories behind the dances that they're dancing to.
I feel that as time went on, directors learned much, much more than what they did initially, and they passed that on to the dancers. So they learned by bringing instructors in who knew specifics of dances or about villages and things like that, or going over to Greece and learning themselves, and they would come back and then they would talk to their dancers and explain to them about it, because there is a story, and that helps in the dance, in learning the dance and doing it properly, I believe, by knowing a little bit about what the dance is about and the story that goes with it. So I think that by a director sharing that information, it really helps the dancer in performing it. And I'm not saying that the dancer will retain it, but at least he's been exposed to it.
I guess that the bigger question too for me is that part of retaining the Greek culture and the Greek heritage in these dances. Do they describe the history of the culture, for one thing?
Oh, Greek dance and Greek folk song definitely describe the history and culture of the Greek people, because you have to think that a lot of the people in the villages couldn't read or write, so how did they pass down their stories? Through song and dance. And through, for instance, religious events and personal events, celebrations. They had created songs and with words about the event, and they created dances that told about the event or portrayed the event. And one thing, just specifically from the island of Kalimnos, where my mother's family was from, the sponge divers, when they would dive, if they dove deep and then came up quickly, they would get the bends, what they called the bends, which would be crippling to them. And so there was a dance called the Mijanikos that was done by the people in the island, the men, and he would be holding a cane and be dancing crippled, and then the music would change and he would be dancing normally because it was like showing how he danced when he was young and able to dance, and then how he became after this crippling, and with sponge diving.
And what was the name of that dance?
Mijanikos, which I guess would translate as the mechanic. Sponge diving, yes.
Do they do that dance at FDF?
They have done it.
One second, guys. I'm going to take this out from underneath you.
Sure.
Because when you lift your hand, it's...
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Sorry.
They have done it at FDF. In Tarpon Springs, we do it because it's typical of our community and the sponge divers. So it's part of our heritage there. And in Kalimnos, of course, when we've gone, we've seen it done by actual men who did have the bends. So yes, it's a strong statement and very, very moving. But there are many dances like that, and songs of the women of Zalongu who jumped off the cliff to not be prisoners to the Turks. And just the words you hear in those are very emotional, but they are history that is being passed down by song and dance.
Why is it important, or I know why it is important to preserve your culture, but as second or third generation immigrants in the United States, why is it important for them to maintain their Greek heritage?
I believe it's important for them to maintain their heritage because they know where they came from. It's part of their being and who they are, and if they don't understand it, they won't know who they are. It's perpetuating it, preserving it, promoting it to others that's very, very important. And I'm a third generation American, so my parents were born here too. But the first time I went back to Greece, I was 30 years old, and I never wanted to go to Greece. It was just because I had no desire to go. I was living in a Greek village in Tarpon Springs. I said, I don't need to go to Greece. But when I went to Greece, everything connected. It was like all of a sudden a lot of things made sense. And it's a hard thing because when you're there, you want to be here. When you're here, you want to be there. When you're a Greek American, there's something that's very, very difficult about being from both places.
Could you describe that a little more? Or what connected to?
Well, I think what connected is you realize where some of these things that you felt uncomfortable about here in the United States, where they came from. And it was, part of your Greek heritage. Maybe it was your stubbornness or your zest for life or your, ability to go to overcome things. Because the Greek people have overcome many, many things and many obstacles. But you realize where and what it was that made you into the person you are. Because I came from this village of Tarpon Springs, which had a lot of Greek influence anyways. So it made a lot more sense when I went to Greece and saw it firsthand. And I talked to a lot of Greek Americans about that, and they say the same thing, that, things make more sense to them once they've gone to Greece and have gone there and seen what Greece is really like. And you become a little more Greek when you come back.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
Yeah, most definitely. You appreciate it. I mean, I've now gone to Greece, I don't know, dozens of times. And I keep going back because I love the country, and you find something new each time you go.
If you could live anywhere in Greece, where would you live?
Ooh, that's tough. I love big cities, so I could easily live in Athens. I love the culture of Athens as a city. but there are some beautiful islands that I would go to in a heartbeat, like Kefalonia, which is on the western side of Greece.
And when you go back there, do you see? Well, let's talk about dancing at FDF and dancing in Greece. How?
Well, dancing at FDF in the early mid 80s to late 80s, early 90s was not quite, it was a staged dance performance. So it wasn't natural almost. But then with the influence of instructors from Greece or people going back and forth now to Greece, directors taking time to go to workshops in Greece and bringing musicians, it started to become more natural. It started to become something that was actually danced, just like you could go to a village and see it danced. And that's what it made a difference. And in Greece, what's funny is I think that the popularity of Greek folk dance in the United States, starting in the mid 80s from the East Coast with the Winter Dance Conferences and FDF on the West Coast, it made Greek folk dancing more popular in Greece because the Greeks were becoming westernized. We would go to Greece and we knew more Greek dances than they did. But then they saw that the United States was picking up on, oh, we want to know more about our culture. We want to know more about Greek dances. So people in Greece started to really research and start to put research down on paper and make CDs of music that has been lost and things like that to give us more things to be able to use over here for performances or for dance and things like that. So I think one helped the other, and today, of course, Greece now is full of the Greek folk culture again, like it should have been.
Well, that's great. I didn't know that. What about the FDF or other types of organizations in other parts of the country? How are they doing?
There are many FDF, what do I want to say, copycats, but that's not really not the word. But that have taken what FDF has and have tried to do it in their metropolis or in their area, and just try to make it changes on it to try to fit their area. We have it in Atlanta, which I was with for a while. I was the judging coordinator and assistant to the director. And it has developed quite strongly now. The one for the Atlanta metropolis is going very well. A little bit of a different setup. It's not so much a competition as it is in California. But New Jersey has something that is similar, as does in a smaller scale Chicago. So, but it's something that helps develop, I believe, the dance groups. And it also helps these dance groups strive for perfection in costume and dance. In many ways, competition they may say, oh, it's not a good thing. We don't like that we compete against one another. But it's up the level, it's up the bar so that they can get the best costumes made or find out and research the costumes to make them themselves, or to get the right music and the right dance steps to the music and things like that. Because early on, not only FDF, but all these groups in the United States, they used the music that they had, which may not have been the correct music, and put the steps to it whether they were right or not. So, that's what I'm saying. It just grew, and naturally it became much, much better. And competition helped that.
Okay, good. So I know there's a couple ways to think about the
Sure,
competition aspect
sure.
of it. When was the last time you were judged at FDF?
Probably, I want to say 6 years ago.
Have you been back?
I did come back about 3 years ago, and it's usually at a tough time for me, so it's hard with work, etc. So.
Had it changed much? Or?
Well, I think that the changes have been good with respect to the dance level, which of the groups, I think that they've just are incredible now. And it's still exciting to see so many groups, and especially the younger children that are involved. And, it's a lot of hard work, not only for the people who put it together, but for the directors, all the time and effort that go into it, and just the manpower behind a group putting together the money to get there, the costumes to put on, the learning of the suites, all of that. It's just a tremendous effort. So it's amazing that it still is going and it still is as strong as it is.
Do you think it will last? I mean, it's very unusual it's lasted 40 years. But.
Yes, I think it will last. I think FTF will go on. It may change a little bit as things do, but when you have these other ones going on now, like Atlanta has grown in the last, 5 to 6 years, has really doubled up and is much stronger than it was. New Jersey is getting that way. Eventually, we talked, we talked before about, so you have then a competition between the best of those and that kind of thing. So it would
Is there
be an
any
interesting
movement towards that? I hear everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people talk about that.
I don't know if there's any real movement towards it. There have been talks, but it would, take a lot to put something like that together. But I think it would be a very interesting thing. But groups cross over. There are groups that come from the East Coast to FTF. My group came one time. But, it's the cost of those things that prevents you from doing it a lot of times. And groups from the West Coast come to some of the ones on the East Coast also. Mm-hmm. So it's, and that's nice because you see what the other is doing too.
Right. And your group won one year, right?
Yes, when we came, the one time we came, I brought 24 dancers. So it was when it was in Phoenix. But so imagine airfare, hotel, registration, preparation. It was thousands of dollars to come for performance.
Right.
And so we placed gold and came back to Tarpon Springs, and it brought a big honor, of course, to our town and to everybody. So that year, of course, I wasn't judging. I danced instead with the group.
Oh, you danced
yes,
that year?
Yes.
What dance? Do you remember the dance?
We did 2 suites. We did, of course, a suite from the island of Kalimnos, and I think that's what really brought us the gold because that brought our scores up quite a bit. And then we did something totally different, which was dances from the Peloponnese, which meant we wore the fustanella, which is the skirt, and stuff like that. So 2 very different and opposite suites.
And did you have musicians, live musicians?
Yes, we had live musicians for the Kalimnos suite, but we had CD or taped music for the other. And that's another thing. The music part is slowly, now almost everyone uses live music, when before it was all canned.
Right. And the musicians, you said that you helped bring some of them over, or
Mm-hmm.
who were some of the names?
Well, some of the ones from Kalimnos when they first started coming, Michalis Kapas, Manolis Hulis, who plays the bagpipe, and then there were others who came from Rhodes, and they found, locally from here, people went over and found musicians. They went to specific villages that they were studying the dances from, and then they found local musicians, and then they brought them over the following year to play and things like that.
If there was one thing that you would like to see in this documentary, or one sort of theme, is there anything that you really think we need to emphasize?
I think you need to emphasize the importance of what FDF has played in young people's lives, because that to me is the bottom line. Learning the dances, dancing, that kind of stuff is great, but it's what that's done for people in their lives and the memories that they will cherish from all of that, the unity that it brought to people, the friends they made, the marriages, the children, and all of that stuff. That to me is what's important, is the community of it.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen so much of that in talking to
Right.
people, and everyone pretty much says the same thing, that it's the friendships and
Sure.
the marriages.
I mean, I don't live on the West Coast, and I live on the East Coast, but some of the friends that I've made, including Peter and his family, are dear, dear people to me, and it's because of FDF. And that is something that's very important to me and to some of the others who I know for many years and have either helped or they have helped me or we've worked together on projects and things like that. You know, I'm older now, so I'm sort of I've backed off or backing off, but these things were things that I really enjoyed, and working with these people was the most important part.
Are you working on anything now?
10 minutes.
Okay.
Just like
How much?
10 minutes.
Okay.
Am I working on anything now?
Greek.
Greek, helping, I still help in our community. I help other groups who sometimes will contact me for information and questions. I might be working on a project with Peter for a costume exhibit because I have a lot of costume pieces and costumes from various parts of Greece. So in that respect, I sort of help.
Talk about the other judges a bit.
Well, when I first started in judging in the mid 80s, some of these people I didn't know, but people like Joe Graziosi I knew from the early 80s, Mary Koros I knew, and again, these were people who I brought to teach my group, and we worked together in workshops, and I taught and they taught, etc. So it was interesting to come and see the perspective that these judges had, because a lot of these people were purely West Coast people. So they had never been exposed to anything that was happening on the East Coast or even in Greece. It was all FDF exposure. So my exposure was very different because I saw what was going on in Greece, but also on the East Coast. And I think people like Joe and Paul Guinness were very, very important in the development of bringing the dance to the higher level. Particularly Paul Guinness, who of course left us very, very early, but he was probably the most incredible source of and Greek folk dancer that I knew. It was something that was in him, and he had an incredible collection of costumes, an incredible knowledge of dance, and a dancer. He was an incredible dancer, and it wasn't just dances from one part of Greece, but all of Greece. And then Joe, to me, is the authority. Joe and I are very, very close, dear friends. And Joe, to me, knows more than anybody, than anybody about Greek folk dance. And he's an amazing source, and it's an addiction for him. When we travel together, because we've done many tours together in Greece to villages and we take people and have parties there in different places. And the funny thing is, Joe, no matter how many years he's been doing this, he always finds more music, more books, and things like that for his library. And we always laugh about what are you going to do with it, And that's what we keep saying, Mary and Joe and I. What are we going to do with all of this stuff? Unfortunately, we haven't figured it out yet, but hopefully we'll find a place that it will go and make some use for people.
What about Mary Koros? What's she like?
Mary is an amazing person. She, of course, her specialty is Cretan dancing, and I know Mary and Joe from the 1980 was when I first met them at a seminar in New York City. And Mary, then we had her down several times, and now she lives in Tarpon Springs. And Mary is an amazing dancer, choreographer, and instructor. And of course, her specialty being Cretan. To me, she's an amazing authority on the Cretan dances and the island of Crete.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think that the foresight that Peter Priovalis had in putting this together, FDF from the very beginning, and the other things that he worked on to make it continue and make it change and make it not stale, is really something that he has to be commended for, because if it wasn't for, I think, his leadership, FDF would not still be here after 40 years. That's an amazing thing, because as you said, it's amazing that it's still around, because there's so many things like this that are not. They last maybe 10, 15 years and then just die out. And I'm glad someone is putting together this documentary, again, thanks to Peter, because so many people will get something out of it, and so many people have already and will enjoy listening and seeing what he's put together.
Right, I agree. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.